Hare Krishna, dear devotees, we are happy to welcome you to our Russian Sangha channel. And today we have with us His Grace Sureshvara das Vanacari, and he will be starting his series on Prabhupadas, lilas and lessons. Sureshvara Prabhu, we're so happy to see you. Welcome to our channel once again, and you have the floor.
Thanks so much, Sati Prabhu. So Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for inviting me back to your Russian Sangha online. Now, last time I spoke about, quote, our Srila Prabhupada. That was the title of the lesson. How His Divine Grace is always available to each and every one of us, to all generations of devotees, through His Vani, His transcendental vibration, and how that is our real, lasting association with Him. As Prabhupada dedicated his Srimad Bhagavatam to his spiritual master and founder Acharya of the Gaudiya Math, quote, he lives forever by his divine instructions, and the follower lives with him. After that class, I proposed to our dear moderator, Sati Devi, that I present a series of lessons from Prabhupada's Vapu lilas, his manifest pastimes, back in the 1970s, as I personally experienced them. Why did I suggest that? Well, because to hear about Prabhupada's earthly pastimes inspires us to serve his Vani, his personal vibration, forever. In today's Leela, I would like to recall lessons I learned around the time Srila Prabhupada initiated me in Detroit, Michigan, on Saturday, July 17th, 1971. I was all of 24 years old then. A couple of days earlier, a group of us had driven more than 300 miles from New Vrindavan, the first ISKCON farm community, where I had been serving since that April. On Friday the 16th, Prabhupada flew in from Los Angeles, but his plane was late to land at Detroit Metro Airport, where our Hare Krishna Kirtan was reaching a fever pitch. An aside, prior to the present age of terrorism, the airport authorities would let us hold wild Kirtan receptions just as long as we didn't block foot traffic. So even after Prabhupada's plane arrived, everyone got off before Prabhupada. So we became desperate to see him. Actually, although we numbered more than 100, very few of us had ever seen Prabhupada before. So our anticipation was becoming unbearable. Prabhupada actually had been out of the States for about a year, from July 70 to June 71. So in that period, the Hare Krishna movement was booming, exploding, and so many devotees were waiting to meet and greet and see Prabhupada for the first time, including me. Suddenly, everyone began bowing down, whole lines of devotees falling flat onto the airport floor. Then I saw Srila Prabhupada, and I too fell flat. Our obeisances were swift and spontaneous, the natural response to seeing something we had never seen before. Absolute power expressed through absolute humility. Our one and only Srila Prabhupada. And that was just the beginning. Moving toward our reception, Prabhupada glided up an escalator and appeared to float amid a sea of devotees toward a portable Vyasasana in waiting. Although he hadn't spoken yet, just by seeing him, we knew that at last here was a person who would not bluff or cheat us. We were singing and dancing and crying our eyes out. And then he spoke. This is exactly what Srila Prabhupada said. Quote, the cause of all suffering is due to misidentification with this material body. Unquote. The most basic truth. But Prabhupada said it with such depth of realization that our jaws dropped open. Wow. Lesson 1. Our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, even as he walked among us, was not a person of this world. He was, as the Bible teaches, in the world, but not of it. Who else but an absolutely pure devotee of the Lord could command such power with such humility? As Prabhupada prayed to Lord Krishna on his sea voyage to America, quote, make me dance, O Lord, make me dance as you like. Srila Prabhupada held initiations that Friday night, but my turn came Saturday morning after a sleepless night of anticipation. Before the ceremony, Prabhupada noticed 2 small boys from New Vrindavan, not wearing tilak. Although they were only 7 and 9 years old respectively, His Divine Grace told them to go put on tilak. And what follows is a transcription of the actual exchange now Prabhupada had with the devotees about tilak. Prabhupada, always remain with tilak. Everyone, that is our trademark. Devotees, laughter. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Bol. So they're laughing and praising Prabhupada at the same time. Prabhupada, laughing. We are selling Krishna for nothing. Devotees, laughing. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada. Prabhupada. Without any price. Still, people are reluctant to take it. What can be done? Devotees laugh. Prabhupada, yes. So this is our trademark. Lesson 2. To follow Srila Prabhupada means to follow all his instructions, the big ones and the little ones. Tilak might seem like a little thing, but as soon as we wear it, we feel more like devotees. And if we're out in public, we remind everyone of Krishna. As Srila Prabhupada began his initiation lecture, unfortunately, I began to drowse from not sleeping the night before. I tried to sit up straight, but then fatigue would overcome me. I couldn't follow the lecture. After countless births and deaths in the material world, here I was, about to receive a spiritual birth from Srila Prabhupada, a most confidential servant of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. And I was falling asleep. Then something happened that woke me up. Clang, clang. In the arms of his mother, a little boy began clanging kartals together. While I was drowsing, Prabhupada had been speaking about how Krishna consciousness continues from life to life. So when the little boy began clanging the kartals, I woke up to hear Prabhupada say, just like this boy, he has had practice. Prabhupada began smiling at the little boy, and the little boy began smiling at Prabhupada. Back and forth went our heads, from the boy to Prabhupada and back. As their smiles broadened, we thought, amazing. They know each other from a past life. Wow. Lesson 3. Because Srila Prabhupada is a pure devotee of the Lord on the highest level of Krishna Prema, his actions on earth were spontaneous and unpredictable. Undisturbed by the child's clanging, Prabhupada chose to use it to teach. In his purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 7:13-14, Prabhupada writes, quote, Vaishnavera kriya mudra vigyena bhujoy. A highly advanced Vaishnav lives in such a way that no one can understand what he is or what he was, nor should attempts be made to understand the past of a Vaishnav. Unquote. In his time with us, Prabhupada was always down to earth and out of this world. In the early 1970s, Krishna consciousness was exploding in America, just as it would explode decades later in Russia. Because Srila Prabhupada had been away from the US for nearly a year, wherever he visited, dozens of devotees were waiting to be initiated. For those of us he initiated that morning in Detroit, Prabhupada would chant one round on our beads. Then his Sanskrit editor, Pradyumna Prabhu, would announce our birth name. Then finally we would come before Prabhupada, who gave us a new initiated name, followed by Das for men and Dasi for women. Suddenly Prabhupada announced my name, Richard Hall. As soon as I came and knelt before his divine grace, I was completely struck with wonder. Looking at Prabhupada was like looking at the ocean, inconceivably deep and powerful. After he asked me what the 4 rules were and how many rounds I would chant daily on my beads, he gave me my name. So this is from the recording of the initiation, which I found recently. I was very happy to find the recording of my initiation, and it's just how I remembered it. Quote, Sureshvara. Sura means demigod, and Ishvara, controller of the demigods, Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma's servant, you are. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, we are always servants. Not that I become Lord Brahma. I am servant of Lord Brahma. Always remember it. Come on, next. Prabhupada was already calling for the next initiate, but I could not move. I was stunned. Looking into Prabhupada's deep, brown, soulful eyes, I could feel him looking right through me, through the layers of countless desperate lives, looking straight into my soul, compassionately accepting me, taking me to his great heart, despite the millennia of perverted desires covering my own. Seeing I couldn't move, Prabhupada leaned forward, held out the beads he had just chanted on, and rattled them in front of my nose. Come on, take your beads, come on. The rattling beads snapped me out of my stupor. I took the beads, bowed down again, and crawled away, overwhelmed by what had just happened, and trying to remember my name. That was the only time I exchanged words with his divine grace. Lesson 4. Although that was my only face-to-face exchange with Srila Prabhupada, it forever fixed my identity as his servant. Because my name is a name for Lord Brahma, the greatest controller in the universe, Prabhupada had stressed that, quote, we are always servant, not that I become Lord Brahma. I am servant of Lord Brahma. Always remember it. The instruction was simple yet complete. Whatever we may think we are, the reality is that we are the servants of God's servants. And now, Prabhus, I'm approaching the end of my talk, so be thinking about what questions or comments you may want to offer. Later that summer, I would collect a little dakshin and mail it to Prabhupada. Dakshin means a gratitude gift to the spiritual master for kindly taking you to the next step of Krishna consciousness. So later that summer, I would collect a little dakshin and mail it to Prabhupada, thanking him for initiating me. I also asked him if there was a tune I could sing to chant the Bhagavad Gita. God knows what I was expecting. A cassette tape of Prabhupada chanting the Gita? Nonetheless, he kindly replied, the verses of the Gita have a specific melody, but you may choose a suitable tune. Most important is that the melody remains very simple. Another valuable lesson. Don't let the melody obscure the meaning of Krishna's words. Keep it simple. Life is complicated enough. Hear the truth of his Gita. One final reminder, dear Prabhus, as I mentioned last lesson, over the years, as I've come to realize more and more of Srila Prabhupada's greatness, I understand that my identity is less as his initiated disciple than as his instructed follower. If we all embrace that shared identity and share it with others, unlimited fortunate souls will be able to follow the path Prabhupada opened wide back home, back to Godhead. So thank you for listening. And if you have any questions or comments, I would be happy to receive them now.
Hare Krishna, Sureshvara Prabhu. We have some questions.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one is, what topics did Prabhupada usually speak on in his classes given on the day of the initiation?
Yeah, good question. What topics did Prabhupada usually speak on? Especially the questioner has in mind on initiation days. So, well, in general, Prabhupada would, like I reported, the first thing we heard Prabhupada say at the airport, the cause of all suffering is due to misidentification with this material body. So that's step one in spiritual life. And that's the first thing Krishna said to Arjuna. After Krishna let Arjuna do all the talking in the first chapter, and then at the beginning of the second chapter of the Gita, Arjuna surrenders. So when Krishna stops speaking just as a friend with light talk, then as soon as Arjuna accepted Krishna as his guru, the first thing the guru said was, "You're a fool. You're speaking learned words, but you're mourning for what is not worthy of grief. The wise lament neither for the living nor the dead." So all of your speaking in that first chapter, Arjuna, was based, although it appeared to be very wise and learned, it was based on a fundamental mistake, misidentification with the body. So in general, that's what Prabhupada was, how he would very often start his talks from that point, because unless we at least theoretically understand that we have nothing to do with matter, that we're spirit, then we can't go to the next step. At initiation specifically, Prabhupada would speak a lot about the commitment that the guru makes to the disciple and the commitment the disciple makes to the spiritual master. he would talk about the necessity of following the four rules, and sometimes just to lighten up the atmosphere and have some fun. When he would ask, "So what are the four rules?" and then the disciple would say, "No intoxication, no illicit sex, no meat eating, no gambling." And then Prabhupada, with a twinkle in his eye, would say, "So, which one is your favorite?" And that would, then everybody would laugh. And yeah, so the four rules and the 16 rounds, because as Prabhupada writes, the chanting of 16 rounds in his sangha, that's the quota he said, is the most essential, the most important instruction. Yeah, because if we're able to chant, if we never stop chanting Hare Krishna, then that enables us to get a higher taste, to avoid those materialistic activities. Or if we're having trouble, to bring us back to the right point. It's all about contacting Krishna through his name. That's how Krishna is most accessible in the Kali Yuga, especially through his name. So, yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Sureshvara Prabhu. The next question we have is from Anna. She is asking, what would make Prabhupada most happy and what would make him most upset?
I think an easy way to answer that would be to, because it's like flip sides, most happy, most upset. So Prabhupada would be very happy when we were working together harmoniously, because when we work together, then we can do so many wonderful things. That word in English, synergy. There's a certain synergy of working together where the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. We can accomplish so much together that we could never do individually. In English, we say, united we stand, divided we fall. In Mayapur in 1976, Prabhupada chose to make that the theme of a talk he gave to a group of book distributors. They were called the Radha Damodar Bus Party Brahmachari book distributors, and Prabhupada chose to speak on the necessity of cooperation. And Prabhupada, out of his humility and also out of reality, said, so because you are helping me, these books are going all over the world. I'm translating the books and annotating, I'm giving the purports, the comments, but I'm an old man. Alone, what could I do? But because you are helping me, great things are happening. It's spreading very quickly all over the world. So cooperation is essential. Conversely, you flip it over, and what would make Prabhupada very disturbed is if he heard of fighting, non-cooperation, factions, splitting. Because if you know a little bit about the history of the Gaudiya Mat history, the Gaudiya Mat, Prabhupada's spiritual master Sangha, called the Gaudiya Mat, that's what fragmented and stopped their preaching, was their own fighting. When Srila Bhaktisiddhanta left this world, he told them to form a governing body and work cooperatively. The word he used was conjointly, same thing. But they didn't do it. A few of them began competing instead to replace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. But you don't replace a founder acharya, you simply cooperate to serve his mission. You carry on the disciplic succession with initiations, and you worship the founder Acharya's form, and you study his teachings, you do his mission, distribute the message of Krishna consciousness. But they didn't do that. They began competing for the assets of the Gaudiya Math, and the whole thing fell apart. So Prabhupada was determined that what happened to the Gaudiya mission would not happen to his ISKCON branch, as he put it, of the Chaitanya tree. He didn't want us to repeat the same mistakes. So even though we did go through a lot after Prabhupada left our vision, because he had set a structure in place that was very solid, we could take shelter of that, take shelter of the whole structure he left us, take shelter of the sadhana, of the books, and of course, take shelter of him. That's the person to whom we offer our highest allegiance. And that's what allows us to cooperate, despite our different Shiksha and Diksha gurus, despite our living in Russia or America, despite being from different generations. We all rally around our founder Acharya. That's where we find our core identity, foundational relationship. So yeah, he loved it when we cooperated, and that was, as you know, his main request, especially when he was leaving us. Your love for me will be shown by how you cooperate to keep this movement together when I'm gone. That was his very unblinking, straightforward, unsentimental sign of love for him, is if you cooperate. To love is to cooperate. So, good question.
Thank you, Sureshvara Prabhu. And we have one more question from Galina. She writes, "Thank you so much for sharing about this initiation day. I'm reading Prabhupada Lilamrita at the moment, second book, where Srila Prabhupada was in San Francisco. What is the main thing for an initiated disciple? What is the main service of a disciple to his guru?"
Okay, so the lady is reading Prabhupada's life story and how he gave initiations, and then she's wondering what's the main responsibility, the main duty of a disciple to the guru. Well, it depends. Of course, we all have an initiation. It is very deeply impressed upon us that before the Vaishnavas, the Guru, the sacred fire, the deities, we're making vows. We're making promises. We're promising to follow certain basic disciplines of bhakti, which purify our consciousness so that we can awaken our love for Krishna and all of Krishna's part and parcels, especially Krishna's devotees. So our duty is to faithfully serve the spiritual master in a cooperative way. Again, just like the last answer, to work with the devotees. And then Prabhupada may, or your spiritual master, may also give you a specific instruction as time goes on, especially as we become more qualified, more purified by practicing those disciplines of bhakti. Just like Srila Prabhupada himself, he met his spiritual master in 1922, and at that time, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said to Abhay Charan Dey and his friend Surendranath Mullik, just when they were bowing down to the sadhu, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, "So, you are educated young men. Why don't you spread Lord Chaitanya's message all over the world, in the English-speaking countries especially? So Prabhupada was struck with wonder that here they were just bowing down to him. So he's already making a request. Why don't you spread Krishna consciousness, Lord Chaitanya's message? So Prabhupada said, I felt obliged to challenge him because Prabhupada said, I was following Gandhi at the time. I was Gandhi's devotee. So Prabhupada said, so who will hear Mahaprabhu's message? We are a captive nation. First of all, we have to get our independence. Then people will listen to us. No one's going to listen to a slave. So Bhaktisiddhanta startled young Abai by saying, oh no, Krishna consciousness is too urgent. It's the urgent need of every living being. It can't wait for a change in politics. So Prabhupada was struck with wonder that for the first time somebody had taken him to a platform beyond what Gandhi was teaching. And it certainly resonated with his own upbringing, being a Gaudiya Vaishnava. And Prabhupada told us there was never a time he can remember when he forgot Krishna. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta kindled that spark in a preaching way. And Srila Prabhupada was, from the very beginning, was meditating on what he had heard. And then 14 years later, in 1936, just before Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was ready to leave this world, after the person who would become our Prabhupada had been initiated, first and second in initiation, and had pleased his spiritual master by helping to open centers in Allahabad and Mumbai, and writing very expertly in English and speaking very expertly in English. Prabhupada was in Bombay and he was trying to increase his family business, and he was also writing back to God. Oh no, he hadn't done back to Godhead yet, but he was writing, and he thought he would write a letter to his Guru Maharaj, for he wanted to know if there was something more he could do. And so what Prabhupada heard in reply was that, I think you can turn yourself into a very good English preacher. This will be good for you. It'll be good for the whole world. So because Prabhupada was so eager to please the spiritual master, he got a very specific instruction. And it was the same instruction he had received when he was first bowing down 14 years earlier. But now, in those 14 years, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta saw in the person of his disciple now, Abhoy Charanaravinda, that this person actually has the capacity to do it. Not just because he's expert in so many things, but because his desire is so deep to please Guru and Krishna. So the duty is general. In general, is to follow the instructions. And as we mature in Krishna consciousness, hopefully what happens is we not only do duties that we're asked to do, but we think about duties, we think about projects or plans or services that would please our spiritual master, because after a while we get to know the desires of the spiritual master. We anticipate the wishes of the spiritual master. Prabhupada told us first class intelligence. First class intelligence. First class is that without even being asked, the disciple anticipates what the spiritual master wants and does it. That's first class. Second class is that the spiritual master has to ask, and then the disciple dutifully carries it out. Third class is the spiritual master asks, and the disciple is incapable of doing it. So more and more we want to come up to that first class platform where we know the spiritual master's life, the spiritual master's teachings, the mood, the mission. We know what would please the Guru, and we tax our brains we think creatively how to fulfill the desires of the spiritual master. So it's a gradual evolution of consciousness, but at least at initiation, we have to be determined. We shouldn't take initiation unless we're resolved. Yes, now I'm ready to give up material life. Specifically, I'm ready to give up intoxication, illicit sex, meat eating, gambling. I'm ready to go for the higher taste of Krishna consciousness. I'm ready to chant, not just sometimes, but daily, 16 rounds, at least on the beads. Okay.
Thank you, Sureshvara Prabhu. Do you really think, what do you think? Does Prabhupada see us, like third generation devotees, fourth generation devotees, second generation devotees? The way he saw the first generation devotees. I mean, do you think he's somewhere being Senapati general for Krishna in some other universe?
Okay, it was a little hard for me to hear. It was a little muffled. The first you were talking about different generations of devotees. What about
Okay.
those different?
Okay, I will cut this out. Let me start again. I'm sorry, I was too far away from the mic. Do you think that Prabhupada follows and sees us, second generation devotees, third generation devotees, and so on, or the way he knew and sees first generation devotees, his disciples? Or do you think he's fighting somewhere as Senapati Bhakta for Krishna in some other universe?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of when people ask, what is Prabhupada's rasa with Krishna? Vaishnava, I quoted that line in the talk. Vaishnavera kriya mudra vigyaha nabudjoy. We can't really understand completely the mind or the internal identity or what the spiritual master was, where he's gone. We know he's with Krishna. So all I know is he's our founder Acharya. And because he is our founder Acharya, not just manifested Vapu for 12 years, from 65 to 77, but he's the founder Acharya for all generations of his followers. Yes, I'm sure he's watching over us, and that's confirmed when people who are not direct disciples of Prabhupada. As I like to say, Prabhupada never introduced himself as the spiritual master of some 5,000 ex-hippies, counterculture people. But he always introduced himself as the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So now he's unmanifest, but he's in charge of the faithful follower. And we would ask him sometimes things like, Prabhupada, can you communicate with us through your murti? The nice murti we have in all of Prabhupada's temples. And Prabhupada said, yes, that depends on your purity. So the pure devotee on Prabhupada's level is not limited by time and space as we are. Conditioned souls, their capacity to communicate, to relate is limited by time and space. It's not like that for the Mukta Purush, the liberated soul. He can communicate with people who are following him. So many devotees report that they have some instruction from Prabhupada in a dream, or they read something in a letter, and then they tried it out, and then it worked for them, and it's just a matter of following Prabhupada's vibration, his instructions. He lives forever by his divine instructions, and the follower lives with him. So he's certainly available. In fact, Prabhupada would tell us that about our generation. He would say, not you, and not your children, and not your children's children, and not your children's children's children, but your children's 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 children, they will be able to worship the deity properly. He would chuckle because we're still, in a way, handicapped by our conditioning. So it takes a while, even if people are. It doesn't mean we can't go back to Godhead, but it means it's in terms of our breeding, where we've come from. It takes a while to get over the ways of, lechas and yavanas, what have you. So with every succeeding generation coming, that generation has opportunity to be even more closer to Prabhupada because of the purity that's come from following him for so many generations. So, and then the second part of the question was what? I forget now.
Do you think he's fighting somewhere as Krishna's Senapati Bhakta in some other universe?
Well, Lord Chaitanya said he was, and he didn't limit it to earth, did he? Yeah, because in that Senapati Bhakta verse in the Sri Chaitanya Mangala by Sri Lochan Das Thakur, the context was Narada Muni approaching Mahaprabhu in Golok Navadvip, in the Navadvip quarter section of Golok, where Krishna as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is eternally performing his Sankirtan pastimes. So Narada Muni approached Mahaprabhu, and he was and Narada Muni is such a yogi, he can go anywhere. Can't even imagine, in the material or the spiritual world. So he goes all the way to Golok Navadvip, and he says, my Lord, this Kali Yuga I can see, because he can see past, present, and future. I can see how bad it's going to become. So what to do? So famous verses follow where Mahaprabhu says, don't worry, with the powerful chopper of the holy name, I will cut the knots of sinful desires of all the sinful people in the Kali Yuga. And those who try to escape and run away, I'm trying to think of the Bengali now, but he does say, More Senapati Bhakta. I will send my military field commander to go and track them down and round them up. So that certainly was what Prabhupada did. And Prabhupada was very much the military field commander when he was walking among us. But he didn't say that it was limited to this planet. And Prabhupada, when he was in New York in 1976 for the first New York Ratha Yatra, Prabhupada founded the movement ISKCON in New York in 1966. It took 10 years for the devotees to get it together to finally have a Ratha Yatra in 1976, because it's very difficult to get permits in New York for things like that. And so Prabhupada was very pleased. And then after the Ratha Yatra, Prabhupada was actually very exhausted. It was the beginning of his declining health. And Prabhupada was scheduled to go to London right away. And that was the austerity Prabhupada did. Prabhupada knew the devotees were depending on him to come and revive them and enliven them and inspire them, because we were so much in the bodily concept of life. We always needed him in Vapu to revive us. So, but he was getting very ill, coughing and mucus, and you can hear on the recordings, Prabhupada is not sounding so well. So the leaders who were in New York for Ratha Yatra, and they were all there, at least from the States, they were trying to convince Prabhupada just to stay in New York for a while. And Prabhupada, this was in the elevator. This is a famous exchange because they were in the Hare Krishna building, which was a skyscraper. They had this big building at the time in Midtown Manhattan. And Prabhupada's going in the elevator. Might have even been on the way to the airport. They were still trying to get him to stay. So, yeah, the elevator door opens. Prabhupada steps out. He turns to the assembly of leaders and says, I want the privilege of fighting like Arjuna to my last breath. So Prabhupada was very much a spiritual warrior. And he, that was his mood. So I don't know where Prabhupada is. I know he's with Krishna, but I don't know where, if Krishna has immediately called him to another place. Yeah. But anyway, at least while we're here, and we have him in his everlasting Vani, and we know what he wants. We know that he's always pleased when we're not just trying to be Krishna conscious for ourselves. Prabhupada is not a salvationist, that we're just trying to get saved for ourselves and let everybody go to hell. No, Prabhupada is in the mood of Prahlad Maharaj, who said, my dear Lord Nishrigadev, I'm not afraid of anything, but I'm simply feeling sorry for all these poor fools and rascals who are just killing themselves with attachment to material life. I don't want to go back home myself. I just want to take all of these fools with me. So Prabhupada was like that. And so he's very pleased when we also have that mood of compassion, trying to help others. But we just have to follow him right out of this world with the help of our Shiksha and Diksha gurus. And if we're lucky, we'll go right where he is. Either it might be having a picnic with Krishna, like Krishna, the cowherd boys and girls, the gopis, or it might mean, going where he is on a mercy mission in the material world. We hear actually in the Bhagavatam that the last birth we do take, even when we're qualified to go back to Godhead, is we do appear wherever Krishna is appearing in the material world. And we take part in that road show. It's kind of a finishing school where we get the sangha of these liberated souls, and we really perfect our service in that show. So right now we're auditioning, we're trying out for the show.
Yeah.
And hopefully by the end of our life, we'll be called. We'll get a call. Yes, we'd like you to participate in the show. So come here.
That's an amazing perspective, right?
Yeah, Prabhupada told us in the first canto. That's where we go.
And I was just thinking, going back to the first part of this question, wouldn't it be wonderful if in 1,000 years from now, 2,000 years, 8,000 years, there would be ISKCON, and ISKCON devotees would be calling themselves servants of Srila Prabhupada, right?
Yes. I mean, that's the only way there'll still be an ISKCON. Yeah. As we know, time breaks everything apart. So the only way to continue is to have a common center, and that common center is Prabhupada, is that unity amidst our ever expanding diversity. Otherwise, we'll just, become sectarian and competing. But Prabhupada wants us to find unity in the diversity, serving him in so many ways, different countries and nationalities and people from different religious backgrounds. But finding our place in in the sun of his mission. We all have a place in the sun of Prabhupada's mission. It takes time to develop. Prabhus, I think I have to leave you now, but it's been so uplifting to be in your association. Thank you for your wonderful questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for giving us this thoughtful and beautiful Prabhupada Katha, this meditation on our founder Acharya. We so much appreciate your kind association, and we are looking forward to your next class in 2 weeks. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
you.
Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Jai Shri Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.